Can a mechanical device, a robotic signature machine, be used to strip the highest office in the land of its legal legitimacy? That is the really unsettling question at the core of a recent congressional investigation. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something that sounds like science fiction, but it's very real. The presidential AUTOPEN. And this isn't just about a piece of technology. This is a deep dive into constitutional law, executive procedure, and, well, some pretty explosive allegations that its use in the last administration created a dangerous black box of unaccountable power.
It's a huge deal. And our mission today is to really unpack the legal line here.
Right.
The difference between, the routine act of signing your name versus the actual non-delegable decision to approve something. We have to look at where the safeguards just completely broke down.
You're talking about the verbal authorizations?
The verbal authorizations, what officials themselves called a game of telephone, things that critics are now arguing, basically allowed staff to take over constitutional authority that belongs only to the president.
And you really can't ignore the political backdrop to all this. I mean, this scrutiny didn't just come out of nowhere.
Not at all.
It was fueled by some pretty widespread public doubt. There was that CBS News YouGov poll. It found 72% of voters were concerned about the president's mental or cognitive health. And when public confidence is that low, the integrity of every single signature, every action, it just matters so much more. Okay, so let's set the stage a bit. The AUTOPEN itself, it's not some newfangled invention.
No, not at all. It's basically a robotic arm that mimics a signature. The idea of assisted signing is almost as old as the country.
I was reading that Thomas Jefferson used something called a polygraph device.
That's right, yeah, polygraph. It let him write duplicate letters at the same time, basically copying his own handwriting in real time.
And then it sort of evolved from there.
It did. Harry Truman was the first to use an automated pen for, general government work, signing letters and photos. But the real game changer, that came in 2011.
That was the Obama administration, wasn't it?
Correct. Barack Obama became the first president to use an AUTOPEN to sign actual legislation.
Wow.
The Patriot Sunsets Extension Act, specifically. And that was a critical moment because now you're applying a machine to a core constitutional duty.
And that raises the big question. If the president isn't physically holding the pen, does it still count as signing under the Constitution?
Exactly. And if it's allowed, where do you draw the line to prevent, misuse?
So what does the law say? Where is that line?
The line is all about the power that the president and only the president holds. For that, you have to look at a 2005 memo from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, or OLC.
The Nielsen Memorandum.
That's the one. It laid out the official legal reasoning. It was mostly dealing with what happens if the president is traveling or sick.
Right. Can he still sign bills into law if he's not in Washington?
Precisely. And the OLC came up with this two-part distinction. First, you have the discretionary decision. That's the actual personal choice to approve a bill or a pardon.
And that can't be delegated.
Never. That decision has to be the president's. But second, you have the ministerial act. That's just the physical task of putting the signature on the paper.
And that can be delegated to a machine.
It can. So the whole legal challenge boils down to one thing: proving that the president actually made that high-level discretionary decision, personally and knowingly.
And that's what critics say this whole thing gets so dangerous. Because in other areas of law, like signing a will, you traditionally needed the person to be consciously present to prevent fraud.
Exactly. The OLC memo swapped conscious presence for specific authorization. And that substitution replacing the president being there with the staffer just saying he authorized it, that's the constitutional risk.
It feels like a huge vulnerability.
It's an open invitation for a staffer to substitute their judgment for the president's, all because they can just claim there was some kind of verbal go ahead.
Which brings us right to the procedural breakdown that the House Oversight Committee found. Because if the system for proving that presidential decision is weak, the whole legal argument just falls apart.
It creates what the committee called the signature black box. The investigation found, just an alarming lack of accountability in how the last administration handled these decisions.
Give us some of the details on that. How bad was it?
Well, the staff secretary, Neera Tandon, her job was to manage all the decision memos, the binders, everything.
She's the gatekeeper for the paperwork.
Right. And she testified she only saw the president in person maybe once every 6 to 8 weeks.
Wait, yeah.
She admitted the entire time from when she handed documents to the Oval Office staff to when they came back signed was a black box. She had no way to know if he'd actually reviewed them.
So there was no personal verification. And on top of that, I read They didn't even keep a log of which documents were auto-penned versus hand-signed?
No reliable system at all. So right away, the historical record, the legal proof, it's compromised. But it gets worse.
How?
The control over the machine itself. Senior officials, including the Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, testified under oath that they did not know who physically operated the AUTOPEN.
I have to stop you there. The most powerful signature in the world was being applied by, what, an anonymous intern. That's genuinely shocking.
It points to a level of negligence, that is.
Right.
Well, it's hard to comprehend. And they were allegedly ignoring their own internal guidelines.
What guidelines?
A draft memo from early on in the administration specifically recommended that pardon letters require the president's original hand signature.
To protect the integrity of that specific power.
Exactly. A safeguard for arguably his most sensitive personal power. And it appears they just abandoned it.
Which leads to the game of telephone scandal. Tell us about that.
This was about the pardons issued right at the end of the term on January 19th, 2025. The Chief of Staff, Zients, verbally authorized the AUTOPEN from home.
From home.
He was relying on a secondhand verbal message from an aide who heard it from other people. Zients himself admitted he sent the authorization email without ever confirming the decision directly with the president.
But, to play devil's advocate for a second, isn't some level of staff reliance just necessary? They're signing hundreds of documents.
Of course. But the issue isn't bureaucracy. The issue is proof. The committee argues that for constitutional acts like pardons, you need contemporaneous written approval.
Something that proves the president's personal will.
Yes. A time-stamped video call, a signed memo affirming the final list, something. Instead, you have this layered verbal hearsay. And that's where critics say the president's direct authority was just completely erased.
So let's talk about the fallout, the consequences. The Oversight Committee came to a pretty stark conclusion.
They did not mince words. They concluded the flawed process calls into question the validity of all pardons, and they went further.
How so?
They declared void all executive actions signed by AUTOPEN that didn't have that proper corresponding written approval.
Voiding pardons, that's a huge step.
It's the most serious stake. The pardon power is solely the president's under Article 2. Constitutional scholars agree that courts can and should void pardons if the decision was actually made by staff.
And this wasn't just a theoretical problem. There was pushback from inside the government, right?
Oh, absolutely. DOJ ethics lawyers raised serious concerns that the president wasn't even aware of the violent criminal records of some people he was pardoning.
Despite the public story being that these were for nonviolent drug offenses.
Exactly. It suggests a process that was so rushed, so sloppy, that the president might have been signing off on things based on incomplete summaries. There was even a briefing memo that suggested the vice president's approval alone was enough to get the president's sign-off on clemency.
When the VP's approval becomes a stand-in for the president's, the system is just broken.
Fundamentally broken.
And all this procedural failure, it feeds directly into the larger political narrative that this was all necessary to, quote, cover up the president's mental and physical deterioration.
That is the political charge, yes. The report alleges that staff were micromanaging everything. His makeup, his clothes, how many steps he walked in public, heavy use of teleprompters, all to manage public perception.
And the AUTOPEN was the tool that let them bypass the need for his constant, direct engagement.
Precisely. The most damning part of that narrative is the claim that senior advisors discussed whether he should get a cognitive exam, not for his health, but for political reasons.
Managing the optics of his health, not the reality of it.
Right. And then you have the president's physician invoking the Fifth Amendment when asked by Congress about the president's health.
Which is just so irregular. You invoke the Fifth to avoid incriminating yourself.
Yeah.
For a doctor to do that about the president's health.
It sends a massive signal that something was being actively hidden from Congress and the public.
And of course, political opponents have seized on this. Former President Trump is already saying a huge chunk of the previous administration's executive orders are invalid and that he's going to cancel them.
And that's why this matters so much. If one administration can invalidate the actions of the last one based on procedural failures, it attacks the legitimacy of the entire executive branch. The system depends on knowing the president is the one making the decisions.
This has been a really complex and, frankly, a disturbing deep dive. It seems clear that while the AUTOPEN machine is technically legal for routine tasks,
For the Ministerial Act, yes.
the procedural failures documented here created a huge crisis of accountability. The risk isn't the robot, It's the potential for staff to hijack constitutional power when the guardrails are gone.
The vault analogy really works here. Presidential power is what's inside the vault. The combination to open it is the president's personal consent.
Mm-hmm.
What happened here, allegedly, is that assistants were dialing that combination, having only overheard the owner's intent, or maybe even just guessing at it. And when that happens, the legitimacy of everything inside that vault is at risk.
And that breach of process leaves us with a final, I think, very provocative thought for you to consider. If the paperwork, the basic proof required to show a president personally made a decision, is intentionally kept vague, leaving the executive branch in a perpetual black box, how can we, the electorate, truly hold the highest office accountable? And what does that mean for the stability and legitimacy of all future presidential actions?